As we heard in the first session, we talked about those church clothes, those behaviors that really people wear to appear to be church but really aren't. They could be those pulling them out of the closet once a week or once a month. It could be the behaviors that are seasonal, that we can act as church when it feels good, but when it's in the dog days of summer or the bleakness of winter, we sort of see them disappear. But they also can be those ill-fitting clothing, those sinful behaviors where we take a stance at church, and none of them really draw people to Jesus as we do them. So as we hear in Paul's letter to the Colossians in the 3rd chapter, he talks about putting off and putting on, this great dynamic of clothing, putting off that sinful behavior and putting on the garments of Christ. Because you and I have been called out of the ordinary existence that this world lives in. We can no longer operate that way. The church can't operate that way. And so there is a consequence to the gospel that we hear, a gospel that has been imparted onto us as we hear it preached, as we study it. But it's not only imparted onto us, it is imputed within us. And as that word dwells within us, what happens is God sort of turns us inside out, because he works on the heart first before it can work in our outside behaviors. So as Jesus turns us inside out with that word, we begin to take shape around Jesus. And it's on that baptismal identity that you and I have. As we went to the font, whether it be as an infant or as an adult, that baptismal identity is based on the words of Christ, what Christ proclaimed as he was walking this earth. But that baptismal identity is also truly based in what Christ has done through his death and resurrection. And so we can put on those characteristics that we hear in Colossians 3 about compassion and patience and humility. And so as we put on these behaviors, then we truly can be church. And it not only treats us as individuals, but it really centers on the community of church. All of us coming together with those common behaviors, where we begin to develop as the body of Christ. And so it begins to express its reality in those two things in that 3rd chapter. That the peace of Christ rules our hearts, and the word of Christ dwells in us richly. That peace of Christ which rules shapes our perspective on how we see one another, but also how we see the world, in reaching them as possible souls to be drawn to Jesus Christ. And then that word of Christ that dwells richly is a word that instructs us and instills in us God's attitude and action for those who are not part of his kingdom yet. And through this peace of Christ and through this word of Christ, God sets his agenda. He sets his mission for the church. And it's to go out and engage and connect people to Jesus. And so as we do this, we can live in the Christmas state of mind all year long. Because it's about being available and it's about being generous. With those things that God has given to us so richly, we need also to impart them to one another. Just like at Christmas, we receive the gifts under the tree. But we also need to be gift givers. So God has given us his gifts. Now we need to go and share those gifts generously by being available to those who need to be drawn to him. Now that's being church, and that's take two.